Welcome back, guys, to LA Indie Book Club Population 1. I'm on a mission to get a bunch of indie novels and read the first chapter to give you an idea of what's available and out there. Now, I also have my own stash of indie novels, so I will be showing you from time to time a chapter of one of my own. So, this Battle Tides was just released May 2nd. A lot of the chapters have these pictures to start them off. It's got spaceships and stuff. Because it's a sci-fi, there's so much to envision with the world within this book. So, Jacques Bastille is a wanted man, dead or alive. After an assassination attempt on his life, he must fight off reptilian bounty hunters and rally his former Maccabee clan to war. He'll discover a long-lost Earth colony holding the secret of the Dragon Eye. He'll meet new friends and old foes as he battles his way to Earth to put an end to his successor's reign of terror. Will he be able to decode the memory glitches he's having to a time and place he's never lived? To a woman he's never loved? A maybe. But first, he'll need his memory back. And his body. What? Again, what do you think of the cover? This is the cover. We did a lot of iterations of this cover, but they all involved a fire-breathing dragon chasing down a spaceship. That was my original plan from the very beginning, because you don't often see a sci-fi book with a dragon on the cover. You're welcome, dragon lovers. Without further ado, I don't think I'm going to read literal chapter 1. This first chapter is the prologue. So I'll read that, and depending on how long we've gone, maybe I'll dip into chapter 1. Prologue. Test flight. Planet Earth. Miramar settlement. The year 2415 AD. Conditions were pretty damn perfect. Above the salt line of the Miramar settlement, it was 16 degrees Celsius. The Caribbean airstream pushed lazily across the inlet and swept long-tailed sea condors along its thermals. These nasty spirited firebirds were descended from the first batch imported after the original Outworld expeditions 100 years ago. They'd been a menace to the aquatic life here since their early arrival, and today they returned to their favorite hunting ground using their favorite hunting technique. That is to say, an alpha would swoop down, disappear below the salty brine, and resurface with a tuna or a dolphin squirming in its talons. Then a protector condor would circle low, blowing a fiery ring to ward off the rest of the pack and isolate their mate, who would simultaneously feast and chum the waters. This, of course, brought the larger sharks to the surface, only to be snatched high into the air, and soon the entire pack was dining. Now, occasionally, the sharks would score a sea condor, but more often than not, the advantage was aerial. The evolved flight tactics favored the alien birds of prey. High above, puffy cumulus clouds hung in the sky like one of those CCD paintings from the colonial rise just after the Third World War, circa 2264. But that was over 150 years ago. The difference being, unlike her brilliant and peaceful oil renderings eschewing man-made tech, this perfect vista was pockmarked with 4 menacing ranger skiffs hovering in a delta formation just offshore. Their matte black, elongated fuselages and short fat wings made it obvious from this distance how the elite group got their handle, the Skycross Squadron. Up close, their tartan Ballard engines hummed and whirred electronically as internal gyros fought the updrafts and crosswinds to anchor them all securely in a precise 3D airspace. Below the waterline, the ocean was calm. The crystal blue waters created high visibility for 50 meters. Sea life swam in and around an active underwater city. This was Miramar, the top-secret test facility of the Kaitos Alliance's Air Corps. Kaidos? Kidos? Kaidos. Kudos. Kudos! This was Miramar, the top-secret test facility of the Kaidos Alliance's Air Corps. But its formal military designation had long since given way to the nickname given by the handful of test jockeys that even knew it existed: Bravo Bay. A brand new Doug was moored beyond the base, tracking sea life, area conditions, and 1,000 per second ever-shifting variables. The defensive underwater guardian was a scientist, gatekeeper, weatherman, and in case of attack, first line of defense. Although the AI mother drone was anchored in place by a retractable leash, the 40-plus micro-drone swarm it housed was highly weaponized and coordinated efficiently, effectively, and autonomously by Doug. In its signature deadpan style, Doug relayed a status report to Bravo Bay headquarters. "It's exactly 12 minutes before high noon and a statistically acceptable day to rattle death's door." The AI's message pinged the heads-up display of the day's fresh meat. A 24-year-old captain named Michael Struthers. "Roger that, Doug," he mentally relayed back as he squeezed his 6'2" frame into the cockpit of the H2XO Mustang and latched an umbilical cord into the life support relay at the base of his neck. Here in the docking pod 4, the vehicle looked to Dash like it was relaxing in a giant jacuzzi, like an athlete, the morning before the big game. As the turbulent water levels outside the ship rapidly engulfed the wings, he cinched his 5-point harness into place across his chest and lap. The final seats hadn't even surfaced from the design labs yet, so this retrofitted HX45 chair had been jerry-rigged into place. There was no rear seat for a Rio either, just an empty hole. It was just as well because per Bravo Bay protocol, the nav for this inaugural sortie should be vacant. With the recent upheaval from the Dracario secession from K-Corps, hotshot pilots were even harder to come by. Every available driver wanted a piece of this new Mustang, but it was a finicky ride. Nobody but Dash came close to passing the sim quals. From the thigh pocket of his flight suit, he pulled out a small weathered flight log notebook. He kissed his ancient Lucky Charm and slid it into the scrum box. The little chamber was currently empty, but after an air sub went active duty, it would be outfitted with the standard emergency toolkit, some rations, a homing beacon, a weapon, etc. Next, he triggered the canopy. The dual interlocking halves slid forward and back into place and sealed with a small sucking swish sound. Now that the seafoam smell was trapped outside the glass, Dash breathed in the slight tinge of a mechanical hydraulic mixture that was so familiar in these new rides hot off the factory floor. The comlink in Dash's HUD crackled to life again with a friendly female face. "Captain Struthers, radio check, check 1, relayed Major Stephanie Stepp Phillips from her position up in flight control. "Radio check, affirmative, Stepp, reading you loud and clear," Dash replied, "though I won't be getting used to having someone else's words rattling around in my head, that I won't. It's devilish," he added over the HUD link. "Roger that," Stepp said with a knowing chuckle. Dash watched her twist her dirty blonde hair into a messy bun and pin it up with a 5-inch prong. Knowing her, it was not just a fashion accessory, but a makeshift weapon if needed. Stepp continued, "All the new toys, and all the glitching bugs to work out," she added, saving her private commentary for their encrypted MindLink relay. In contrast to the bubble of silence inside the Mustang, flight control was an echo chamber abuzz with activity. A half-dozen international personnel monitored flight gear, network traffic, atmospheric and vehicular stats, and especially those damn pesky seabirds who had picked one hell of a spot for their morning picnic. Stepp watched another bull shark get plucked clean out of the water. She sighed, annoyed. "Ranger lead, "Who we got topside today?" she asked into her headset. "It's Gigsby, ma'am," Ranger Tracy Gigsby Riggins confirmed as her face popped up on Step's feed. "Gigsby, keep an eye out on the sky trash and barbecue their asses if they swarm any closer to our reef." "With pleasure, Step." Gigsby flashed a thumbs up and a smile. That would be a fun order to fulfill if it got the green light. "Major," Doug chimed in, "I could swarm and reduce the flight hazards to negligible levels in 22.3 seconds if cleared for live ordnance, ma'am." "Negative. Stand down, Doug." Step rubbed a bandaged thumbnail along her brow. "Last thing K-Corps wants is for their trillion-dollar octo-brain to be used for a glorified duck hunt." "Heard," Doug said with an exaggerated sigh. "Heard." "Maybe," Step offered the temperamental AI, "we find you some other target practice later on if you're up for a training op?" "Absolutely," Doug perked up. "That would really skimmel my wibblers, Major." "Okay, that is not even never mind. Dash, are you all zipped up?" she asked as her eyes flicked across his ship readouts for the 20th time. They hadn't changed. All indicators showed the cockpit seal was solid and all systems were optimal. "Aye," Dash answered. "Snug as a bug." "About damn time. All right then, what say we light this tuna?" Step circled a finger in the air to her comms team. "Last looks, everyone," she added off mic as they leaned into their monitors. "It's go time." "Aye," Dash said, punching a button labeled "Start," which he knew to translate from the original Japanese manufacturers. Start. Humble beginnings to such an auspicious event along man's quest for air superiority. The Wright brothers, Chuck Yeager, Alan Shepard, Quantal Fisk, Davin Jess, and now Dash Struthers. Faster, stronger, farther, longer, pushing that envelope, bleeding that edge. Fwoom! Goosebumps formed on his arms as the whole cockpit shimmied and purred to life. Readouts, monitors, and heads-up displays cycled around Dash through startup sequences and settled by one into ready status. Not bad. Cold boot to system ready in 3.4 seconds. "Whoa, that's almost 5 seconds faster than last week." Step tapped some info directly into her screen and maintenance logs popped up. "What did you do?" "Oh, I talked with Gator, and we decided we'd bypass the brake cycle altogether since it's pulling the same as the G12 adapters." "Smart." Step called up the G12 specs on her monitor. "You know, the brass at K-Corps R&D will be thrilled to know you've outfoxed their brightest eggheads with a workaround," she relayed. "They don't know the half of it," Dash relayed back as he chuckled to himself. "It'll be worth the demerits." He watched the CB performing his final tasks on his wing. The fresh-faced kid removed the final fuel hose and retracted the gangplank from the H-2X. Stepping back through a portal, he closed the hatch behind him, lifted off a safety latch, and punched a big red button. Yellow lights accompanied a warning buzzer. 2 minutes. Dash had watched this same process 100 times during training. "Flooding the tubes," the CB announced to everyone on comms. Dash could see he was a little nervous. Hell, they all were. So when the kid looked up at him in the cockpit, he held a hand up and gestured for him to calm down. The kid nodded and smiled. He was hitting all the right marks and doing a great job. They all knew details mattered, as did grace under pressure. That's what brought people home alive. Dash was thankful he had such a highly trained crew to have his six, even the ones that looked like they hadn't hit puberty yet. He checked at his foot pedals. Down below he could see the walkway underneath that led to the ship's living quarters. Once fully operational, this long-range fighter would comfortably hold 2 crew members and 4 extra passengers. On long flights, he'd be able to lower his seat from the cockpit and access some fairly comfortable R&R space. Not luxurious like some of the executive yachts he'd seen. No, K-Corps wouldn't allow for that, but they'd be adequate. Looking out over the fuselage, Dash watched the floodgates open all the way, and water levels rise even faster around the mid-sized fighter. It was odd to see a naked fighter jet, totally void of all the standard marks or colors of any specific Ranger unit. This one was much larger than any of its predecessors because of the new triple-engine build. It was the first time they'd all seen the new Sirenium shell too, which wrapped around the ship like a smooth and curvaceous protective skin. It was pliable enough to repulse space frag and small arms fire, yet durable enough to withstand the bottom of the ocean or the most ornery hypergate. Word on the street was it could punch through a mountain, but Dash didn't want to test that theory on its maiden voyage. "Damn, that bird's sexy, Dash. Bring her home in one piece, yeah?" The Seabee smiled through the portal to Dash, adding a hang loose already signal. This was something the Bravo flights had adopted years ago, as opposed to the more traditional thumbs up on the more regimented carriers. "You ain't seen nothing yet, kid. Hold on to your knickers." Dash smiled back, returning the sign through his cockpit window just before it was engulfed under a swirling agitation of seafoam. Dash turned his focus to his instruments, checking and double-checking them. Finally, he pulled a pair of olive-colored Nomex flight gloves from his other thigh pocket and wiggled his fingers into place, snug as a second skin. He slid his left hand over the throttle controls and his right hand gripped the flight stick. If it weren't for the climate conditioning, his palms would have been a sweaty mess. While these controls, augmented by the mental relay, had definitely improved since the first trial, for a while they were notoriously touchy and buggy as hell. He remembered at least 2 sim rides that he'd crashed and flooded because he was so acclimated to the sticky controls of the older HX-45, the fastest and most maneuverable ship in the Air Corps. Formerly the fastest and most maneuverable ship in the Air Corps. But this new air sub would cut an entire barrel roll with the small flick of a wrist. It was like flying a hummingbird. "Well, Dash," Step's voice cut through his headspace, "all systems are go. You ready to take her for a swim?" "Aye," he exhaled slowly. "Light her up." "First time out of the gate, Dash," she cautioned him via relay, but Dash broke in. I got it. You break it, you bought it. Look, I'll be gentle with her, Step. Promise." "Just looking for a nice, easy lap around the lunar Dale and back," Step replied. "What's left of it, anyway." When her mic was open, Dash could hear the nervous click of her pen. What the hell is she so nervous for, Dash thought. I'm the spam in a can strapped to the 2-megaton space submarine. "You know, I can hear you until you close your mic," Step chided. Dash swore. Dash swore. "Sorry, Major. I'll never get used to this new tech." He shook his head to clear it up. He took a deep breath and exhaled through his pursed lips. There were 3 engine modules on the panel in front of him. He flicked the safety off the first, hesitated a second, and then punched it. The hydros slowly began to whine as they spiraled up to speed. He wiped a dust fleck off of buttons 2 and 3 and then focused his attention up the tube as the bay doors opened. At the end of that track lay the open waters of the Caribbean. And Doug. "SkySat, this is Bravo Bay," Step called up. "Requesting final clearance for that moon dance. Over." "This is SkySat. Roger that, Bravo Bay. Be advised that you have a 90-minute window before the entire Jacorio fleet begins their mass exodus, and good riddance, if you ask me. Until then, the lanes are clear." "Well, shit on a sunstick. That's 2 days ahead of schedule," Step said privately to Dash. "Okay, 10-4, SkySat. All right, Dash. The waters are smooth, the sky is clear, and you've got the ball." "Copy," Dash acknowledged. He slowly opened and closed his fingers on the controls a couple of times, making sure that he was nice and limber. Feathers touch. It was important to be one with your bird, loose, just like the water all around him, flowing, responsive. Dash relayed out. "Open the gate, Doug, and count me down." Heard, Doug replied as he lowered the shields. You're in the blue in 10, 9. Dash pressed a thumb against a mobile comm mounted to his left, and a 3D picture of a beautiful blue-haired Japanese woman rezzed up on screen. He and Mizuki had met when he was stationed under Neo Tokyo. They had fallen in love and been married almost 5 years ago. Usually this picture of her was his other lucky charm, but she'd been missing since Colonel Wexel's attach on the Bellevue. He had to remind himself that everything would be okay. One thing at a time. He shoved his fears back into the basement and resolutely returned both hands to the controls. Bleed the edge, Dash said with a resigned confidence. Hooah! Bleed the edge, Step echoed the base credo back at him. 6, 5. Track lights illuminated the submerged launch tube. 3, 2. At 0, the subrestraints flicked open. Dash juiced the throttles, and the hydros sucked in thousands of gallons of water per second in a frothing swell that catapulted the Mustang swiftly down the tunnel. Lights strobed overhead as he glided along. Halfway down, he felt the sonic safety pulse Doug emitted, which dispersed any unsuspecting sea life lingering near the mouth of the portal. Most of them would swim off after the first pulse. By the second, not even a sardine remained. The coast was completely clear. The H-2XO super sub shot out of the launch tube and into open water. Urging the hydros faster, the Mustang jumped forward, leaving the Bravo Bay superstructure and Doug behind in a cloud of bubbles. Mustang clear, he notified the base. Mustang clear, Step confirmed. And have you got a visual on your escort, aft, 7 o'clock high? Dash turned his head, and sure enough, there was the chase sub bearing down. HX-45F class. HX-45F class. Old school. Inside would be his old buddy, Lieutenant Colonel Vincent Gator Gordon. They'd flown 100 missions together, and it was an honor to have him along on this particular test flight as well. Visual confirmed. Better late than never, Gator. Wouldn't miss it, Junior, Gator replied. Had to see this new toy causing all the freshmen to shit their diapers. Just try to keep up, old-timer. Dash threw a hang-loose sign to his wingman through the canopy. Gator returned the signal. Now, this is being recorded for posterity, so try not to puke up your toenails this time. Dash winced and looked down at the 3D picture of his wife again. That's something Mizuki would have said, he thought to himself, forgetting again about the HUD link. Stay with us, Dash, Gator said privately back to him. I know. Don't worry. I got this. Dash flexed his fingers once more and then nudged the throttle up to 18%. As the two subs cut across the ocean floor, they suddenly crossed over the lip of the Puerto Rico Trench, and a bottomless deep lay open beneath them. He rolled the Mustang over and dove into the abyss. Gator followed. Inside the cockpit, the ambience of the HUD changed seamlessly. With limited window visibility, the augmented reality maps provided eyes into this dark wonderland. Dash's eyes began to glow white. Moving from your physical eye to cybervision was strange the first few times because the ship around you just sort of disappeared, and it was almost as if you were free-floating through the water at breakneck speeds. Dash's shoulders, Who wrote this? Dash's shoulders sagged a little as he relaxed. Dash's shoulders sagged a little as he relaxed. This now felt like any of the 100 sim rides he had performed. The two ships darted in and out of huge underground water structures. Gator took a curve that thrust him forward into pole position. He and Dash had played this game many, many times. Dash snugged up tight on his contrails. Back during the topside racing days, this was known as drafting. They had studied the technique at the Kaitos Academy to glean any combat advantage it may have to offer. The two moved seamlessly in and around one murky structure after the next. close enough to see that these underwater playgrounds of theirs used to be a thriving cityscape. Havana from the looks of it. They flew past a skyscraper, and Gator's slipstream knocked a spire loose from the balcony of what was left of an old hotel. Dash swore and jerked the stick to the right, almost overcompensating himself right into the iron skeleton of an abandoned construction project. He deftly rolled out of the collision course and rejoined Gator on the building's far side. "Good hands, Mustang," Gator said, checking his friend over his shoulder. Getting some proximity warnings up here," Stepp chimed in. "What's going on out there, boys? Thought we were taking things slow and easy." Doug started the answer. "The Mustang was almost—" "Shut it, Doug," Dash relayed, and then, breathing heavily, read from the displays. "Pressure stable, HUD sync, and visibility are excellent. Hydros maintaining 20%. Very responsive, ma'am." "Roger that, Dash," Stepp confirmed. "You are clear to begin Level 2 maneuvers. Let's get vertical." Dash reached up to engine number 2 and engaged it. "Spinning up atmospheric drive," he called back, increasing throttle to 25% and braking for the surface. The sunlight began to penetrate through the deep blue waters more and more with the shallower altitude. The Mustang cut through the Caribbean underwaters like a knife, leaving Gator's chase sub further and further in its wake. The HX-45 had the older Atmos drives, which required its pilot to breach, sit atop the water for a few seconds while they purged, and then could take off into the sky. The Mustang's newer tech was far superior. Dash was about to perform the first breach and burn. The stern of his ship creaked and groaned with the vastly changing hull pressures, but all the shielding seals held, and the ascent was a smooth ride. "Ready to breach in 20 seconds, Dash said, his heart pounding in his chest. The Skycross squadron hung there in place, ready to break anchor and pick up the air-to-air visual inspection whenever Gator's rig stopped for its mandatory purge. They'd be able to escort Dash the rest of the way into space and back. "Ranger Force in position," Gigsby reminded them. 15 seconds, Stepp informed them all, "till history is made." "Come on, Dash," Gator cheered him on from a good 200 meters below. Dash watched as the waterline rushed toward him. "Come on, baby," he muttered under his breath. The Mustang breached, spewing the ship high into the air like a baby humpback. Startled, the sea condors scattered in every direction, bellowing loudly. Back in the cockpit, there was a brief moment as the hydros detected oxygen intake and switched over to the atmospherics. Dash watched the engine lights blink from green hydros to yellow hydros to green atmos in a split second, and with a loud burst, the atmospherics kicked in and the burn began, pinning him to his seat. The Mustang launched successfully skyward. "Atmos are a go," he said, his white knuckles excitingly clutching the throttle. "I repeat, Atmos are a go." There was a small celebration in the control room when Stepp broke in. "Roger that, Mustang. One for the record books. Can you confirm Ranger visual?" Dash rolled the ship, and indeed there was Ranger Gigsby and her 4 Skycross fighters closing into escort position fast. "I got him, Stepp. Visual confirmed." The Rangers assumed formation around the Mustang as they all climbed up through the stratosphere. The pattern, with an assist from their special nav gear on board, would help scramble the Mustang's footprint in the sky. The last thing they wanted was to attract the wrong attention to their secret base, and especially to this latest project, which would be a substantial military game-changer. Dash's eyes swept over the controls, and all the ship's vitals were green. "Bravo Bay, I am throttling up to 45%, he informed them. "Roger that, Dash," Stepp called out. "Shoot the stars." As the Mustang increased its speed, the Rangers began to struggle to keep up. As the distance between them increased, Dash called out the speeds. Mach 15, Mach 18, Mach 25, Mach 30. Dash reached down and engaged engine number 3. "Ions coming online." "Ions coming online," Stepp echoed to base. 10 seconds to subspace. 10 seconds to subspace, Dash confirmed, adding playfully, "To the moon, Alice." Those would be the last words recorded by Captain Struthers. His only visible hint of a problem would be the split second, when the yellow warning light flicked on over the supposedly inactive hydros just before the ions kicked in. There was a massive explosion which marked the end of that H2XO prototype and the end of Struthers. Dun 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 dun. Okay, I won't get into chapter 1 much, but you need to read this part. So, chapter 1, The Hunted. Planet Dakar, the year 2561. A fuzzy bright light cut through the sticky blackness, and with an abrupt and painful jerk, Jacques Bastille re-entered consciousness. His first thought was, who the hell is Struthers? These military-grade binocores were supposed to be wiped clear of the previous seed lines and inhabitants. He was going to need this meat suit tuned up and scrubbed out once he figured out wherever the hell he was. Bastille's eyelids flapped open, and he tried to make sense of the warm pillow his head rested upon, but it was no pillow. It was sand. Some sort of beach, perhaps? A vacation? As his hearing recalibrated and the ringing diminished, he could pick out the roar of the ocean surf somewhere in the distance. He quickly deduced that the planet's atmosphere was breathable since there was a gaping hole in his helmet and he was still alive. He struggled to his knees and hit the release lever around his neck. The helmet unlocked and he peeled it off. He spit out sand and blood from his otherwise parched lips. A small tract down the left side of his face was tender, and he winced when his gloves skimmed across it. It kind of felt like it had been recently flame-broiled. Bastille ran a quick internal system scan. In his retinal HUD, there were a bevy of warning messages indicating internal damage to the cybernetics of his binocore. His body armor was charred and trashed, most likely the only thing that had kept him alive, absorbing the bulk of, well, whatever had happened. Swaths of his tattered desert cloak caught in the wind and swirled around him. One of his arms felt like it was just shy of broken. And the other? Wait, why can't I feel my right arm? Something caught his eye a few feet away from him. It was a hand buried in the sandy dunes. Still wobbly on his knees, he edged closer. He grabbed the hand whose tattered glove looked identical to his own and pulled. The arm came free from the sand. Loose grains rushed in to fill the void as if nothing had ever been there. Was this his arm? Dumbstruck, he looked over at his right shoulder. Where an arm should have been, there was just a tangle of wires hanging out, sparking from time to time when the tips crossed. What the hell? Bastille forced himself vertical. And what were these small black floating things drifting down from the sky? He grabbed at one passing by. It looked like burning fabric, and it turned to black powder in his fingers. Turning around slowly, his breath caught in his chest, and his mouth fell open. It was no ocean. The sound was the plume of fire from a gigantic crash-landed C-class freighter going up in smoke. Is that my ship? Another explosion sent more blackened debris and fireballs raining down all over the area. Bastille shielded his eyes with the loose arm. From the looks of it, the ship had skidded for a quarter click, digging its channels into the soft ground before it nose-planted and settled where it was. All right, that's enough of a taste into the next chapter. You can at least meet Jacques Bastille and Struthers. So that is my military sci-fi. Growing up as a military brat, we saw a lot of Air Force bases. Going to those air shows and seeing everything from P-51 Mustangs to the B-2 bombers. It was just always so cool. It was awesome. So I wanted to, it was almost my homage in this prologue chapter to these guys like Chuck Yeager and the test pilots that all came before to get us where we are today. So anyways, I hope you enjoy. I hope you check that out. So once again, this is the LA Indie Book Club. Write in the comments. Do you have a recommendation for a book or a novel that we need to read chapter 1 on? Put it down there. Also down in the comments, what did you think of the chapter 1, the prologue? What did you think of Battle Tides? What did you think of the cover? And how do you feel about that? It's a 400-page book. It's a very substantial sci-fi novel. So, and it's available on Amazon. So check it out. And yeah, guys, we'll see you the next time.